basics. So we will see what are the other legal concepts and nurse-client relationships. So talking about informed consent, as I told you already, that you have to keep in mind, right? So you have to tell him what kind of surgery, who is going to perform, what kind of anesthesia, what would be the result of the prognosis, okay, so any complications that can happen, okay, so the staff or the hospital or the medical professional or the surgeon, nobody will be held liable. If they sign only, then they can be posted for any invasive procedures or hospitalization in the NICU, PICU, intensive care units, or then to perform surgeries. Okay, so this we have to keep in mind. Then talking about death and dying, many legal issues around the events of death, including a basic definition of the actual point of the person, okay, is considered dead. Ethical and legal questions are raised by issue of euthanasia. Okay, so what is euthanasia? You should have studied mercy killing, right? So in India, I don't know how much it is implemented, but in abroad countries, people usually prefer euthanasia and then mercy killing. It is put into action. Okay, so active euthanasia, intentionally administering a lethal dose of morphine to client in order to cause death, is defined as intentional homicide. Passive euthanasia, such as removing breathing support or withholding a blood transfusion, forms terminally ill client. Active we say when we induce drugs. Passive we say when we take out the life support for the patient, okay, or withholding a blood transfusion for terminally ill client with irreversible brain damage, raises legal questions that are being dealt by the court of law. If it is acceptable with the permission of the patient, it can be done, otherwise it can be held liable. Okay, usually euthanasia patients will ask, okay, so they will ask, and if the hospital agrees, okay, where he cannot survive at all and he is in a vegetable form, okay, so in that case it can be considered. So without the patients asking, or it should be even notified to the relatives telling that the patient is opting this, so what could be done, only then it can be carried out. Then handling of bodies, nurse is legally obligated to treat a deceased person with dignity and care. Okay, so we have to treat it with dignity and care. Wrongful handling cloud cause emotional harm to the survivors. Very important. Okay, so even a dead body should be treated in a dignified way, because the dead body is a person to someone very close, father, or it could be mother or spouse. If you don't treat it dignifiedly, if they find that you are ill treating, then you can become liable. Autopsy. Consent for autopsy must be taken, okay, that is before death, or a close member should be given. Autopsies may resolve post-mortem when they do, okay, may resolve legal and medical conditions and are required in certain circumstances as death resulting from suspected child abuse or other criminal activities. Organ donation, legally competent persons are free to donate their bodies or organs for medical use. So consent forms are available for this purpose. They have to give their consent when they are alive itself, that they are able to give after the death. The whole it can be parents or siblings or close relatives who can also give. The National Organ Transplantation Act prohibits selling or purchasing of organ. It should not be done for selling or purchasing where transactions of money is happening. A nurse may serve as a witness when a person wishes to give consent for a donation. So when he is about to die, he tells to the nurse, please give away my eyes, or certain organs can be donated. In that case, nurse can be a witness telling that yes, the patient has asked for it, so that can be told. So living will and health care surrogates. The federal government has recently passed the Patient Determination Act. This act requires health care institutions to provide information about advanced directives such as living will. Living will are documents instructing physicians to withhold or withdraw life-sustaining procedures of client whose death is imminent. We know that he is going to die, okay, and if he is asking to withdraw, okay, the life support, okay, so it can be done, okay, on the basis of the patient's wish. Healthcare surrogate statutes are sometimes also living will, okay, here it is given as like that, okay, where physician can withhold or withdraw life sustaining procedure. But even will is something when a patient is dying, and if he has not written will, he can tell to the nurse and get an advocate, okay, in their presence he can say on whom the will has to be written, okay. And then you have healthcare surrogate statutes are sometimes also referred to as durable powers of the attorney. Clients execute these documents to appoint someone to make healthcare decisions on their behalf when they are no longer able to do. Okay, so here again, so that is living will, but I think here they have given it differently. Okay, so it's life safeguards, legal safeguards and nursing practice. So physician's order should be there, it should be accurate whenever we carry out any kind of orders. Short staffing, the issue of inadequate staff may arise sometimes. Legal problems may arise if there are not enough nurses to provide competent care. Okay, floating. Nurses are sometimes required to float from the area in which they normally practice to other units. So in your ward, there is no patient, but in emergency ward, there were a lot of patients got admitted because of mass accident. So you will be posted in emergency ward at time being so that you can be a help. Okay, that is called as floating. So if you are not well versed and if you go to do something, it can harm. Okay, so that also can become issue. Okay, so they have to be very careful. So they should also request for a orientation of the unit. Then incident report. So anything fall, injury has occurred, immediately we have to make it a report. Incident report is filed when something arises that could or did cause injury and which are not dealt with good care. Example, if a nurse administers an incorrect dose of medication, clients fall out from bed. So it can be incorrect dose of medication she has given, client has fallen from bed, or intravenous infiltration that has happened, swelling, okay, because of IV line. The skin causes sloughing or scar. The nurse should write an incident report. Most institutions provide specific forms for this purpose. Many nurses are reluctant to file incident report because they believe these reports will harm their employment records. Actually, incident reports are used by institution administration for quality assurance and risk management. They ignore writing, but they should write these so as to improve, the risk management. By reviewing incidental reports, administrators can determine areas of client risk, where all they are risk and what could be done to prevent it. Incident reports, supplementary quality assurance and help in developing programs to ensure provision of high quality care. Incident reports are not maintained in the chart because they cannot be used in court of law. Though you write and keep, but it is not used in the court of law. It is not used for legal purposes. Incidental reports are the tools used by risk management. So mainly for risk managers, they will see, in what all ways the patient can be put at risk. So how that could be managed. Risk management is a system of ensuring appropriate nursing care. So reporting obligations. In some situation, nurses are required to report certain communicable disease or criminal activities such as abuse, gunshot wounds, attempted suicide or rape to the appropriate authority. When a nurse comes across all these, she has to immediately report. Good Samaritan law, helping other person, has been enacted in almost every state and province so as to encourage healthcare professionals to assist in emergency situation. These law limit liability and offer legal immunity for people helping in an emergency, provided to give reasonable care. So it helps in giving reasonable care at emergency state. The nurse should be able to help the person. Contract. It can be either written or oral agreement between people in which there is mention of goods or service exchange. For example, by accepting a job, a nurse enters into an agreement with the employee. So before that, she cannot leave. She's putting an agreement for 3 years or 1 year. She has to work until she finishes her contract. Okay, so it can be a oral or it can be a written agreement. So usually it is a written agreement. Okay, if you have to leave abruptly, then you'll have to pay the fine. Okay, how much ever they are demanding, that has to be paid, and you'll have to get out of the institution. Okay, controlled substances, like another legal issue that might arise for nurses, involves the use of controlled substances. In 1970, the Comprehensive Drug Abuse Prevention and Control Act was passed in United States. Okay, so control, like substance abuses cannot be used. Okay, it covers substances such as narcotics, depressants, stimulants, hallucinogens. Nurses may administer controlled substances, but only under the direction of a licensed physician. Only if there is an order, only nurses can give. Okay, and should be kept securely locked, and only authorized person should have access to it. Okay, next, talking about contributing negligence. So liability to both the doctor and hospital for the nurse's action. If anything has gone wrong by the nurse, okay, then it can be held responsible with the hospital and the doctor as well. Perhaps one of the most important legal doctrines affecting the nurse legal responsibility is the doctrine of respondent supervisor, which states that an employer is legally liable for his employee's negligent conduct that occurs in the furtherance of the employment relationship. When any employee has done a mistake, it also affects the employer, okay, the head of the institution or an hospital. The doctrine of respondent superior applies to the nurse when she is acting under the direction and control of a physician to the hospital. In a given case, the question is raised and argued whether or not the right to direct and control the nurse exists. If in a given instance, the hospital or the doctor does have the authority to exercise direction and have control over the nurse in the performance of our duties, and the hospital or physician is responsible to the patient for injuries arising out of the nurse's negligent conduct, this is known as vicarious liability. Because of a nurse, if there is a damage or injury to the patient, then everybody can be held liable, and that is called as vicarious liability. It should be remembered that the doctrine of respondent superior is not dependent on salary, but rather to the ability of the employer to direct and control. So sometimes when you're doing, that's why some mistakes, they will not keep you in the hospital, they will suspend you and they will remove you, they will terminate you, okay, because they don't want to be into trouble. The doctrine of the respondent superior works in 2 days, that the nurse could be the employer liable for the negligent act of her employees. Again, it should be noted that the power of authority does not lie with the person who pays the salary, but is rather on the liability of one person to direct and control another. The nurse could have supervisory authority over the nurses, and other person under authority to direct and control their actions could result in respondent superior making her liable for their action. So anytime a junior nurse is doing a problem, it is also given to the accountability of the senior nurse. Okay, so they have to be very, very careful. Vicarious liability. Vicar means one who performs the functions of another. Okay, so somebody else is doing, the functions of another person. Accordingly, vicarious liability means liability for wrong committed by another person. Somebody else has done, okay, but then the wrong goes to the other person also. Normally a person is held liable for wrongs committed by him, but he may sometimes be held liable for wrongs committed by another person, like a senior nurse when a junior nurse does, or when an employee does, it affects the employer. Common illustration of such liability are the liability of a master of acts for servants done in the course of employment. To prove that master is responsible for the act of the servant, 4 essential elements of his conduct of service must be satisfied. The master's power of selection of a servant, because why the employer is getting into trouble, because he is the one who selects the person, then the payment of remuneration is given. The master's right to control the method of doing work, he can actually find out what are the risks, okay, and how the risk management can be done. The master's right of suspension or dismissal, when he knows a person is not appropriate, immediately he can suspend them, or he can terminate them or dismiss them. So when he is not able to do all these things is when it goes to the greater part of affecting the life of a person. Liability of the physician, and then we will see what is the liability of the hospital. Okay, the doctor is held liable for the nurse's action only when he has the authority to direct and control them. When the nurse is working in a private office, it is likely that every act that she performs in furtherance of the doctor's practice will evoke the attention of the respondent superior. So, talking about the liability of the physician. If he is under him, if a nurse has done mistake, then he will be held responsible. Liability of the hospital under them, when an employee is done, it will affect the employer. So still we have, so I think we can continue with the next classes. We will see what are the defenses and what are the various types that comes under defenses. So today I will just